In 2026, most people won't fail financially because they're irresponsible. They'll fail because they keep buying the wrong things, quietly, repeatedly, and without realizing the damage. There won't be one big mistake. No dramatic collapse, just small purchases that feel normal, justified, harmless. But those purchases are the reason money never sticks. They drain momentum before it ever has a chance to build. What's dangerous is that no one tells you to stop. In fact, you're encouraged to keep going. Today, I'm going to show you what you must stop buying immediately in 2026, not to restrict your life, but to finally regain control of it. Because once you see these patterns, you can't unsee them. The hidden spending trap of 2026, before we talk about what to stop buying, we need to understand why 2026 is different. Because this year doesn't forgive the same mistakes that previous years did. In the past, you could waste money and recover. You could overspend one month and catch up the next. You could make financial decisions emotionally and clean them up later. That margin is gone. In 2026, the economy doesn't punish laziness. It punishes unawareness. Most people believe they have an income problem. They don't. They have a decision problem. Money isn't disappearing because paychecks are too small. It's disappearing because spending has become automatic. Swipe, tap, approve, no pause, no friction, no reflection. And here's the trap. When spending becomes frictionless, thinking disappears. You don't feel the money leaving. You don't experience the loss. You only feel the absence later when stress shows up and options disappear. This is why people say, I make more money than ever, but I still feel broke. Because being broke in 2026 doesn't look like poverty. It looks like constant pressure. Bills covered, but barely. No buffer, no breathing room, no flexibility. And flexibility is the real currency now. The people who suffer most in 2026 aren't the lowest earners. They're the people with fixed lifestyles and no margin. They buy things assuming stability will continue, assuming income is guaranteed, assuming tomorrow will look like today. That assumption is expensive. Here's the hard truth. Every dollar you spend today is a vote for the kind of future you'll live in 6 months from now. And most people are voting against themselves without realizing it. Let's talk about the spending category that quietly does the most damage. Not luxury, not emergencies, not even big purchases. It's normalized spending. The things everyone buys, the things no one questions. The things that feel reasonable. That's where the real damage hides, because you don't defend against what you don't see as a threat. In 2026, danger doesn't come from recklessness. It comes from comfort. Comfort tells you it's fine. Comfort says you deserve this. Comfort whispers you'll figure it out later. Later is expensive. What most people don't realize is that money problems don't begin when the bank balance hits zero. They begin when decision fatigue sets in, when you're constantly reacting instead of directing, buying to relieve stress, buying to save time, buying to feel normal, buying to feel caught up. Each purchase solves a short-term emotion while creating a long-term constraint. And constraints don't announce themselves. They show up as anxiety when an unexpected expense appears, fear of job loss, inability to take opportunities, staying in situations you've outgrown. This is why telling people to just save more doesn't work. Saving is a result, not a behavior. The real behavior is what you stop buying. In 2026, wealth isn't built by dramatic actions. It's built by removing silent drains. You don't need extreme discipline. You need awareness with consistency. Every unnecessary purchase creates friction later. Every avoided purchase creates leverage. This year, money has to be intentional. Not obsessive, not restrictive. Intentional, because the people who win financially in 2026 aren't the ones earning the most. They're the ones leaking the least. And once you understand that, the next things you must stop buying become painfully obvious. Convenience is quietly bankrupting you. Convenience used to be a luxury. In 2026, it has become a default. And that's the problem. At no point in history has it been easier to avoid discomfort. Food arrives at your door. Transportation appears on demand. Anything you want can be delivered within hours. On the surface, this looks like progress. In reality, it's one of the most expensive shifts your finances can experience, because convenience doesn't just cost money. It removes friction, and friction is what forces good decisions. When something is inconvenient, you pause, you evaluate, you decide if it's worth it. When something is convenient, you react. And in 2026, reactive spending is punished fast. Let's be clear. Convenience itself isn't evil. The issue is when convenience becomes a lifestyle, not an exception. Most people don't realize how much they're paying for speed and comfort because the costs are spread out and disguised. An extra few dollars here, a small premium there, a service fee that feels insignificant. But when you zoom out, convenience becomes one of the largest categories in modern budgets. Food delivery is the easiest example. Ordering food feels like saving time. But what it really does is transfer control. You're paying more for the same calories, more for less nutrition, more for someone else's efficiency, not yours. In 2026, the difference between cooking and ordering isn't a few dollars. It's hundreds per month. And that money doesn't disappear. It shows up later as pressure. Pressure to work more. Pressure to accept jobs you don't like. Pressure to stay where you are. Convenience creates dependency. Once you rely on it, discomfort feels unbearable, and discomfort is where growth lives. This is why convenience spending is so dangerous. It conditions your nervous system to avoid effort. If something takes time, you avoid it. If something requires planning, you outsource it. If something feels slightly uncomfortable, you pay to remove it. But money doesn't grow in comfort. It grows in systems. In 2026, people who rely heavily on convenience live in a permanent state of catch-up. They're always reacting, always paying premiums, always wondering where their money went. The scary part, most of them don't feel irresponsible, they feel efficient. I'm busy. I don't have time. This helps me function. And for a while it does. Until the bill arrives in the form of financial fragility. Here's the truth that no delivery app will ever tell you. Every time you pay for convenience, you trade future flexibility for present relief. You're borrowing ease from your future self, and the interest rate is high. Now let's talk about transportation. Ride apps are convenient, but in 2026, they're priced for people who have already won. If you're still building stability, these services quietly keep you dependent. You don't feel it per ride, you feel it per month. What could have been savings becomes operating expenses. What could have been margin becomes maintenance. Convenience spending keeps your life running, but never improving, and that's the distinction that matters. There's a psychological shift that happens when convenience becomes normal. You stop asking, "Is this necessary?" and start asking, "Why not?" That question is expensive, because why not ignores opportunity cost. Every dollar spent removing friction is a dollar that can't create leverage. And leverage is what gives you choices. In 2026, people with leverage can walk away from bad situations, take opportunities, quickly absorb shocks without panic people without it feel trapped. They can't afford delays. They can't afford mistakes. They can't afford patience. Convenience removes patience. It teaches your brain that waiting is bad, effort is unnecessary, discomfort should be avoided. That mindset doesn't just affect money, it affects decision-making everywhere. The people who escape financial pressure in 2026 are not the ones who eliminate all convenience. They are the ones who choose it strategically. They ask, is this convenience buying me time that I will reinvest productively, or is it just making my life easier today? If it's the second, they pause. Because they understand something most people miss. Convenience compounds against you if it's habitual, just like debt, just like bad habits, just like avoidance. This section isn't about guilt, it's about awareness. Because once you see how much convenience is costing, not just in dollars but in momentum, you stop defending it emotionally. You start seeing it clearly. And when you do, the next category becomes impossible to ignore. The spending that's so quiet, so invisible, so normalized, that most people don't even remember signing up for it. Subscription addiction and invisible leaks. There is a category of spending in 2026 that almost no one feels guilty about, because almost no one feels it at all. Subscriptions. They don't announce themselves. They don't demand attention. They don't feel like spending. They feel like background noise, and that's exactly why they're so dangerous. In earlier decades, spending required effort. You had to go somewhere, hand over cash. Make a decision in public. In 2026, spending happens silently. You authorize it once and then forget it exists, until months pass, years pass, and you still feel like your money disappears for no clear reason. Subscriptions are designed for this exact outcome. Low enough to ignore, recurring enough to drain, emotionally justified enough to defend. Individually, they feel harmless. Collectively, they become one of the largest fixed expenses in modern life. And fixed expenses are the enemy of flexibility. Here's what most people don't realize. A subscription isn't a small purchase. It's a decision to permanently reduce your future options. Because once money is pre-committed, it's no longer available for opportunity. You can't redirect it, you can't deploy it, you can't use it strategically, it's already gone. And the more subscriptions you have, the less control you have over your financial direction. In 2026, the average person doesn't know how many subscriptions they have, what they cost per year, which ones actually add value. That lack of awareness is expensive. Subscriptions quietly normalize spending before earning. You pay before you produce. You consume before you create. You relax before you stabilize, and this trains your brain in the wrong order. Comfort first, security later. That order never works. The psychological danger of subscriptions isn't just financial, it's emotional. Subscriptions create entitlement without effort, entertainment without intention, tools without mastery, access without commitment. You stop asking, is this worth paying for? And start asking, why would I cancel? That shift matters, because once something becomes part of your identity, my shows, my apps, my services, cutting it feels like loss, even when it's costing you freedom. In 2026, many people would rather stay financially tight than experience mild discomfort. That's the trap. Subscriptions also distort value perception. When something is billed monthly, you stop evaluating it annually. A $15 subscription doesn't feel expensive, but $180 per year might. Multiply that by 10 subscriptions. Now you're at $1,800 annually, quietly. That's not entertainment money, that's emergency fund money, that's investment seed money, that's flexibility money. And it's gone before you even notice. The most dangerous subscriptions aren't the obvious ones. They're the ones you use sometimes, the ones that might be useful, the ones you plan to cancel eventually. Eventually is expensive. Here's the rule financially stable people follow in 2026. If a subscription doesn't directly increase income, protect health, save meaningful time, it must justify itself every single month. Not emotionally, mathematically. They ask, if this charged me today, would I actively choose it again? If the answer is no, it's gone. This isn't about minimalism, it's about control. Because subscriptions turn variable spending into fixed spending, and fixed spending limits your ability to adapt. And adaptability is everything now. Think about what happens when income fluctuates. Subscriptions don't care. When stress increases, subscriptions don't pause. When opportunity appears, subscriptions don't move. When emergencies hit, subscriptions don't disappear. They keep pulling. That's why financially disciplined people are ruthless with them. Not because they hate enjoyment, but because they understand leverage. They know that peace of mind isn't created by entertainment. It's created by margin. Margin allows patience. Margin allows calm. Margin allows choice. Subscriptions reduce margin quietly. And here's the hardest truth. Most people don't need more income in 2026. They need fewer commitments. You can't build momentum while dragging weight. Subscriptions are weight. Once you see them that way, cancellation doesn't feel like sacrifice. It feels like relief. And once you start reclaiming that control, another spending pattern becomes obvious. The one driven not by comfort, but by comparison. Status spending versus real wealth. One of the most expensive mistakes people make in 2026 doesn't look like a mistake at all. It looks like progress. New phone, new clothes, new car upgrade, better looking life. On the surface, it feels like you're moving forward. But financially, this is one of the fastest ways to stay exactly where you are. Status spending is dangerous because it feels productive. It convinces you that buying signals growth, when in reality, growth is happening elsewhere. In 2026, appearance is cheap, stability is rare, and most people are paying for the wrong one. Status spending is fueled by comparison. Not jealousy comparison, seeing what others have, feeling behind, wanting to look normal. But normal is expensive now. What used to be occasional upgrades have become expected maintenance. Phones aren't replaced because they're broken. They're replaced because they're old. Clothes aren't bought because they're needed. They're bought because styles changed. Cars aren't upgraded for reliability. They're upgraded for image. None of these decisions feel reckless individually. That's what makes them effective traps. Status spending drains capital while giving you nothing that produces. It doesn't increase income. It doesn't create security. It doesn't buy time, it buys perception. And perception doesn't pay bills. In 2026, the most financially vulnerable people aren't the ones with the least. They're the ones trying hardest to look like they have more. Because looking successful requires spending, and spending reduces your ability to become successful. This creates a loop. Spend to look stable. Lose margin. Feel pressure. Spend more to feel better. And the cycle continues. What makes this worse is social reinforcement. No one criticizes status spending. No one warns you. If anything, people encourage it. Treat yourself. You deserve it. Life is short. Those phrases are emotionally comforting and financially destructive when used without limits. Real wealth in 2026 doesn't look exciting. It looks boring. It looks like driving a paid-off car longer than necessary, wearing clothes that still work, ignoring trends, saying no. Without explaining, this doesn't mean wealthy people don't enjoy nice things. It means they buy them after leverage exists, not before. Here's the distinction most people miss. Status spending happens before stability. Wealth spending happens after stability. When you reverse that order, everything breaks. Status spending also creates identity pressure. Once you buy something to signal a certain lifestyle, you feel forced to maintain it. The car needs better gas. The clothes need upgrades. The phone needs accessories. One purchase pulls others behind it. That's how people end up locked into costs they can't easily escape. And escaping is what matters most in 2026. The ability to walk away, to pause, to pivot. Status spending reduces your exit options. It makes your life heavier. And heavy lives don't move fast. Here's a reality check. The people you think you're impressing are not tracking your progress. They're busy managing their own pressure. And the ones who actually have wealth, they're not impressed by appearances. They recognize leverage immediately. They notice who has flexibility, who isn't stressed by delays, who isn't reacting emotionally. That's real power. In 2026, the people who win financially are invisible early. They don't announce their plans. They don't upgrade constantly. They don't compete publicly. They build quietly. And then one day they have options, while others have obligations. The goal isn't to never enjoy life. The goal is to stop confusing looking successful with being secure. Because one drains you, the other protects you. Once you stop buying for status, something shifts. You stop reacting to other people's lives. You start directing your own. And when that happens, another pattern becomes obvious. One that costs money not through comparison, but through avoidance. Buying comfort instead of control. There is a type of spending that almost never gets questioned, because it doesn't look irresponsible. It looks reasonable. It looks soothing. It looks like self-care. But in 2026, this category quietly does more damage than most people realize. Comfort spending, not luxury, not indulgence, comfort. The purchases meant to make life feel easier, calmer, more manageable. Extra services, upgrades, tools you might need. Products promising relief from stress, fatigue, or overwhelm. The problem isn't comfort itself. The problem is when comfort replaces control. Because control is what actually reduces stress long-term, and comfort only masks it temporarily. In 2026, people aren't stressed because life is harder. They're stressed because they have less margin, less time, less money, less flexibility, and instead of fixing the root cause, they buy things to dull the feeling. A new app to feel organized, a gadget to feel productive, a service to avoid inconvenience, a purchase to feel on track. But none of those change the underlying structure. They create the illusion of progress. Comfort spending is dangerous because it feels like problem solving. You buy something and think, this will help. And sometimes, briefly, it does. But then the stress returns because the problem was never the lack of a tool. It was the lack of systems. In 2026, systems beat solutions. Control beats comfort. Here's what most people don't realize. Every comfort purchase is an admission that something in your life is misaligned. Too busy, too chaotic, too unstructured, too reactive. Instead of fixing that, comfort spending lets you avoid it, and avoidance compounds. The more you avoid building structure, the more you rely on comfort. The more you rely on comfort, the less control you have. The less control you have, the more stressed you feel. That loop is expensive. Comfort spending also weakens discipline. When your brain learns that discomfort can be purchased away, it stops tolerating effort. Small inconveniences feel unbearable. Waiting feels like failure. Effort feels optional. That mindset spills into money decisions. You stop delaying gratification. You stop saying no. You stop building patience. And patience is the foundation of wealth. In 2026, financially stable people are not the most comfortable. They're the most intentional. They don't ask, will this make me feel better? They ask, will this give me more control next month? That single question filters out most comfort purchases immediately. Comfort spending also disguises itself as investment. This is where people get confused. They buy productivity tools, they don't fully use courses, they don't finish equipment, they don't monetize apps, they don't integrate, and they justify it by calling it growth. But growth isn't about buying. It's about execution. If a purchase doesn't reduce ongoing costs, increase earning power, remove recurring friction, it's probably comfort, not control. The uncomfortable truth is this: most people don't need better tools. They need better boundaries. Boundaries around time, boundaries around spending, boundaries around energy. Buying comfort is easier than enforcing boundaries. That's why it's so tempting. In 2026, the people who regain financial stability don't feel better immediately. They feel clearer. They tolerate small discomforts now to avoid massive stress later. They cook when it's inconvenient. They plan when it's boring. They track when it's annoying. They wait when it's uncomfortable. And that discipline compounds into calm. Comfort spending steals that calm in exchange for temporary relief. There's also an emotional side to this. Comfort purchases often come from exhaustion. When you're tired, you're less rational. When you're overwhelmed, you want relief. Companies know this. That's why comfort products are marketed late at night, after long days, during moments of weakness. They don't sell logic, they sell escape. But escape doesn't build futures. Control does. The financially strongest people in 2026 are not the ones who eliminate comfort entirely. They're the ones who delay it. They say, I'll make this purchase after I stabilize. I'll upgrade after I build margin. I'll add comfort once control exists. That order matters. Comfort after control is enjoyment. Comfort before control is dependency. Once you see that difference, your spending changes automatically. And when your spending changes, something else becomes clear. The people who succeed financially don't buy differently by accident. They follow a different operating principle entirely. What financially smart people do instead, once you stop buying the wrong things, the obvious question becomes, what do you do instead? Because financial discipline without direction turns into frustration. Smart people in 2026 don't just avoid mistakes, they replace them with systems. They don't rely on motivation. They don't depend on willpower. They design their finances so good decisions happen automatically. That's the difference. Financial intelligence today isn't about how much you earn. It's about how deliberately you allocate. Here's the first thing financially smart people prioritize: margin. Margin is unused capacity, extra cash, extra time, extra mental space. Margin is what allows calm decisions under pressure. Most people spend until nothing is left, then panic when life happens. Smart people stop earlier. They don't ask, how much can I afford? They ask, how much margin do I need to stay in control? That shift alone changes everything. In 2026, financially smart people build buffers before benefits, emergency funds before upgrades, stability before style, flexibility before comfort, not because they're afraid, but because they understand leverage. Leverage is the ability to respond without stress, and leverage comes from reserves. The second thing smart people do differently is sequence their life correctly. Most people try to enjoy life now and fix finances later. Smart people do the opposite. They stabilize first. They simplify second. They expand last. That order reduces friction. When your life is simple, money stretches further. When money stretches further, stress reduces. When stress reduces, clarity increases. And clarity is expensive unless you build it intentionally. Smart people also focus on inputs, not outcomes. They don't obsess over becoming rich. They obsess over becoming consistent. Daily decisions, weekly reviews, monthly adjustments. Small, repeatable actions beat big emotional moves. This protects them from extremes. No panic buying, no impulsive selling, no reaction to trends. They move slowly, which is why they survive longer. Another major difference: financially smart people track reality, not vibes. They know what comes in, what goes out, what's fixed, what's flexible, not perfectly, not obsessively, but honestly. Clarity removes fear. Fear comes from uncertainty, not numbers. When you know your numbers, you stop guessing. When you stop guessing, confidence returns. Smart people in 2026 also invest in earning power, not appearances, skills, networks, knowledge. They don't chase fast money. They build reliable income. They ask, what skill increases my value next year? What effort compounds over time? What creates optionality? Optionality is freedom, and freedom is the real goal, not luxury. They also protect their mental bandwidth. They limit decisions. They reduce noise. They ignore trends they don't understand. They know that confusion is expensive. So they choose boring strategies, consistent saving, simple investing, predictable expenses. Boring works. Boring builds. Boring wins quietly. One of the most powerful things financially smart people do is this: they say no early. No to unnecessary upgrades. No to lifestyle inflation. No to pressure purchases. They understand that every yes today is a commitment tomorrow. So they hesitate before committing. That hesitation saves years. And finally, financially smart people redefine success. Success isn't spending freely. Success isn't looking rich. Success isn't copying others. Success is calm, sleeping well, handling surprises, making decisions without fear. That calm comes from alignment. Your spending matches your values. Your income supports your goals. Your lifestyle fits your reality. When those align, money stops being emotional. It becomes a tool, not a source of stress. In 2026, the smartest financial move isn't buying less forever. It's buying with intention, knowing why. Knowing when, knowing the trade-off. Once you understand that money stops controlling you, you start controlling it, and that's when real progress begins. If this video made you pause, if it made you uncomfortable in a good way, that's not an accident. It means you're starting to see money differently. And that shift right there is where real change begins. Most people will close this video and go right back to old habits. Not because they're lazy, but because they don't slow down long enough to decide. So before you scroll, before the noise returns, do one simple thing. Subscribe, not for motivation, not for hype, but for clarity. Every video on this channel is built to help you think more clearly about money, not chase trends, not feel guilty, not feel behind. If you want a calmer, smarter approach to finances in 2026, this channel is for you. And if this video resonated, like it, not for the algorithm, but to remind yourself that this is a conversation worth continuing. Drop a comment and tell me one thing you're stopping this year. Just one. Because awareness turns into discipline, and discipline turns into freedom. I'll see you in the next video.